Welcome to this explainer. Look, if you're an executive or a compliance pro, I know your dashboard is probably already flashing with 100 different metrics right now. Navigating that daily business landscape, yeah, it's complex enough. But there's this hidden, massive variable out there carrying just immense financial stakes. It's the kind of thing that's so often ignored until it's literally too late, yet it can rewrite the rules of your entire industry almost overnight. Today, we're going to explore exactly how top-tier organizations are finally managing this massive variable and actually turning unpredictable policy changes into highly actionable intelligence. Now, I really want you to sit with this million-dollar question for a second. What if a single bill introduced today could cost your company millions tomorrow? I know, it sounds a bit traumatic, right? But legislation truly has the power to reshape entire industries in the absolute blink of an eye. Think about it. A regulatory proposal from a government agency or a new tax amendment can instantly affect your compliance requirements, your supply chains, your employment policies, and ultimately, your bottom line. The stakes, honestly, they couldn't be higher. So, Section 1, the cost of waiting. Let's look at how most organizations handle this, because unfortunately, they fall into a very dangerous trap of reactive compliance. And this brilliantly illustrates the stark contrast between two completely different corporate mindsets. On one side, we've got the classic wait-and-see approach, reactive compliance. A lot of organizations literally just wait until a law has already passed to react. And honestly, that's like trying to sew a parachute after you've already jumped out of the plane. You're looking at hugely expensive last-minute compliance projects, severe operational disruption, massive budget overruns, and just totally missed advocacy opportunities. But in contrast, look at proactive intelligence. Organizations that monitor these developments early, they can calmly plan ahead, allocate their resources efficiently, and actually turn a potential regulatory headache into a clear-cut strategic advantage. Which brings us to Section 2. What is legislative tracking? How exactly does a proactive company actually stay ahead of these massive risks? Okay, let's establish our baseline here. Legislative tracking is defined as the continuous process of monitoring proposed laws, bills, amendments, consultations, parliamentary debates, committee discussions, and regulatory developments that might impact an organization. Now, I really want to emphasize the word continuous here. This is absolutely not some one-off audit you do at the end of the fiscal year or a quick quarterly check-in. No way. This is an always-on radar. It's constantly running in the background, keeping your leadership team informed while there's actually still time to prepare and adapt.
Let this powerful quote serve as a sort of mental palate cleanser for a moment. Legislative tracking transforms policy uncertainty into actionable intelligence. This right here is the ultimate value proposition. You're taking something that is inherently chaotic and unpredictable, the whole political and legislative process, and you're refining it. You're turning it into a strategic, calculated tool that your boardroom can confidently use to chart the path forward. But let's get into the actual specifics of this. Section 3. Why early monitoring matters. So, why does early monitoring actually matter so much? Well, it's because true compliance and strategy begin way before a bill actually passes into law. Early monitoring gives you that absolutely crucial runway. It lets you identify emerging risks early on and prepare operational changes without any of the panic. It empowers your leadership to make informed decisions and, this is key, it gives your public affairs teams the time they desperately need to engage with policymakers and build stakeholder coalitions. Ultimately, doing all this dramatically reduces your compliance costs and fiercely protects your business continuity. Simply put, the earlier you know, the more options you have. So how do we actually pull this off effectively? Let's look at Section 4, Linkonize's 5-step process. Okay, let's dive into this. This framework is exactly how Linkonize continuously turns what is essentially a fire hose of raw, chaotic legislative data into a polished executive strategy. The steps are continuous monitoring, industry impact analysis, stakeholder intelligence, risk assessment, and strategic recommendations. We're going to break these down to see exactly how they build on each other to form a pretty much impenetrable strategy for your business. Right, so steps 1 and 2, continuous monitoring and industry impact analysis. These are all about filtering out the noise. Continuous monitoring casts this massive net over parliamentary activity, committee hearings, government announcements, the whole shebang. But here is the absolutely crucial point. Not every single bill is going to affect your organization. And that's exactly where step 2 comes in. Industry impact analysis evaluates the direct influence a specific proposal is going to have on your unique business operations, your market conditions, and your financial performance. So instead of drowning in data, you're only focusing on what truly impacts your bottom line. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how understanding these specific networks in Step 3, stakeholder intelligence, allows organizations to engage far more effectively. Because legislation doesn't just happen in a vacuum, right? It's heavily influenced by various networks of people and groups. By monitoring government departments and agencies, you unlock direct regulatory engagement. Tracking industry associations helps you identify collective business impacts. And keeping an eye on parliamentary committees and subject matter experts, that gives you the critical insight you need to shape your long-term legislative preparedness. When you understand exactly who is pulling the levers in the background, your organization can engage so much more intentionally. And then we have steps 4 and 5, risk assessment and strategic recommendations. Because let's be real, monitoring alone just isn't enough. You have to actually do something with the data. Risk assessment evaluates the financial and operational implications. This allows your leadership team to prioritize actions based on hard evidence, rather than just relying on assumptions or, guesswork. Then, strategic recommendations take that data and turn it into concrete action, delivering highly practical public affairs planning, engagement strategies, and policy response blueprints. This is the exact moment where intelligence officially transforms into a tangible, highly valuable business asset.
Now let's pivot to the return on investment. Section 5, strategic business benefits.
First off, who actually benefits from all this? Well, this intelligence framework spans healthcare, financial services, tech, telecom, energy, manufacturing, real estate, retail, education, you name it. The takeaway here is incredibly simple. Regardless of which industry you're in on this list, if your organization is affected by public policy, and let's be completely honest with ourselves, every organization is, you desperately need proactive intelligence. There literally isn't a single sector in the modern economy that's immune to the ripple effects of legislative shifts. And when these industries actually utilize early tracking, they achieve these 5 core business outcomes. First, better strategic planning, simply because leadership is making decisions with total, absolute confidence. Second, lower compliance costs, because being proactive completely cuts out those massively expensive, rushed, last-minute fixes we talked about earlier. Third, reduced business risk. You're identifying challenges months or even years before they escalate into full-blown crises. Fourth, improved stakeholder engagement, which ensures you're talking to the right policymakers at exactly the right time. And finally, a much stronger competitive advantage. Tying this directly back to our earlier comparison of proactive versus reactive companies, businesses that anticipate change are always, for sure, going to outperform competitors who simply react too late. Which brings us to a defining summary of this entire approach, and a really powerful takeaway. Because when it comes to legislation, early awareness isn't just an advantage, it's a competitive edge. It truly is the stark difference between being a proactive market leader and constantly playing an exhausting, expensive game of catch-up. I want to leave you with a final thought to really ponder as we wrap up this explainer. Take a hard look at your current strategy and ask yourself, are you waiting for legislation to become law before taking action? Or are you ready to stay informed, reduce your risk, and make dramatically better strategic decisions? If you are finally ready to stop reacting and start anticipating, it's probably time to rethink your legislative risk strategy. You can actually learn a lot more about transforming policy uncertainty into your competitive advantage over at Linkonize.com.